The Five of Swords is about how you deal with conflict and confrontation. Are you a bully who forces your will on others? Or do you decide it's just not worth fighting? Please join me and learn how to interpret this card when it shows up in a reading. Hi everybody, I'm Sue Allen Clayton. Welcome to my channel where we'll be learning the tarot deck one card at a time. Today's video is about the Five of Swords. This video will begin with a short description of the card. Next, I'll briefly explain what the card means when it appears in a reading. Then we'll talk about what each element symbolizes and what the card means when it shows up in both the upright and reversed position in a reading. I'll share some examples from my life so you can relate to the card in a real-world situation. And stay tuned until the end and I'll give you some questions to help you connect with the card. I will be using the Rider-Waite Tarot in this video. You'll find the link to the deck below, as well as to the many books that I've used in my research. So let's get started. In the Five of Swords, we see a red-headed young man. He is wearing a green tunic over a red garment, red tights, and orange boots. He appears to be smirking. He's carrying two swords in his left hand, and they are resting on his left shoulder. He's holding a third sword in his right hand, and it is resting on the ground. We see two swords at his feet. All of the swords have a blue edge and a white edge. We see two other figures in the card who are walking away. The medium-sized person on the left is wearing yellow and orange garments with a green left sleeve. The smallest person in the middle, wearing yellow, appears to be weeping. Directly behind the three men, we see a choppy blue ocean and mountains on the distant shore. The sky is blue with jagged gray clouds. All of the figures are standing on level gray ground. When this card appears in a reading, it's about looking at your relationship with conflict and confrontation. Specifically, are your gains at the expense of others? Its meaning depends on who we see as the hero in this card. Do you see yourself as the bully in the foreground who has won the battle? Or are you one of the two men who are retreating and decided not to fight? If you focus on the bully, this card is about looking at your own bad behavior and learning from your mistakes. For instance, why do you get pleasure from defeating and humiliating other people? You need to consider whether winning is worth the cost of ruining relationships. And you might need to also consider what your ambition might be doing to other people. If you see the two men walking away as the heroes, this card is about accepting your limits, acknowledging defeat, and figuring out how to recover from a loss. Several authors interpret the three figures, who are small, medium, and large in size, as representing the different stages in our human growth and development. Here's a really interesting interpretation of this image from the book Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot, the true story of the world's most popular tarot by Marcus Katz and Tally Goodwin. The authors point out that this card may be based on three figures that were depicted in one of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck's illustrator Pamela Coleman Smith's earlier works, called A Book of Friendly Giants, about three pirates named Dare and Do, Catch and Kill, and Fear and Fly. You'll see an image on the screen, and I've linked to the book in the comments below where you can read it for free. Here's the story according to Marcus Katz and Tally Goodwin. Dare and Do is at the coastline, suffering the results of his recklessness, while Fear and Fly is gathering up the swords. Catch and Kill is always between the two, trying to curb the hastiness of the former and encourage the anxious cautiousness of the latter. The moral of the story is that when we are too cautious, too hasty, or too quick to try to serve others, we may meet misfortune. In this story, the three pirates end up as lowly servants for giants after a long tale of overambitious schemes. Let's talk about the symbolism in the Five of Swords. First of all, we see a red-headed young man. Red is the color of passion, so I expect him to be passionate and maybe a bit hot-headed. He is wearing a green tunic over red garments and red tights. Green signifies adventure and growth. His red undergarment and tights represent passion. His orange boots represent determination and knowing what he is doing in this battle. He appears to be smirking and very pleased with his efforts. We're not seeing any kindness or empathy. He's carrying 2 swords in his left hand, and they are resting on his left shoulder. The left side is about emotions, so he likely has some feelings about what he's doing. He's holding a 3rd sword in his right hand, and it is resting on the ground. The right side is about logic, so he's likely thought about what he is doing. We see 2 swords at his feet, so it appears that the 2 retreating soldiers have left their weapons on the ground. All of the swords have a blue edge and a white edge. Most of the sword is a cold blue color, which represents that it is about the cold, unyielding facts. The white portion of the sword represents purity and purification. We see 2 figures in the card who are walking away. The medium-sized person on the left is wearing yellow and orange garments with a green left sleeve. These colors show him to be optimistic and intellectual, but also very practical. He has dark hair, which shows him to be mature but not elderly. He looks like he's taken his loss in stride. The smallest person in the middle, wearing yellow, appears to be crying. Yellow, like the sun, is the color of the intellect and being able to see things clearly. He may have decided that he didn't have the ability to win the fight and has taken his loss very personally. Directly behind the 3 men, we see a blue ocean. Water has to do with emotions. These waters are not calm, so this represents unhappiness. The mountains on the distant shore indicate that there will be obstacles ahead. The sky is blue with jagged gray clouds. The gray clouds obscure the optimism of the blue sky. There are 2 interpretations here. It could be that the storm is clearing and we will be back to blue skies very soon, or it could mean that things are getting worse as the blue sky will soon be completely hidden behind the clouds. When the 5 of Swords appears in an upright position, it could symbolize that you are experiencing a conflict, dispute, or some kind of upheaval, that you are in a hostile environment where people have an us against them mentality, that you are being intimidated or bullied, that people are thinking about their own self-interest and not how their decisions impact you, that you are in a no-win situation, that you won but it's a shallow victory, that someone is gloating about their victory, that you feel scattered, that you've decided to retreat instead of doing battle, and finally, that you are being deceived. Here's an example from my life about someone who only took her own needs into consideration. For several months, I took Tai Chi classes. The teacher had built a very small studio in his backyard that was 1 step above a shack, and there were usually only 6 or 8 of us in a class. Most of us would get there early and line up where we had a view of the teacher. It was a long, narrow room and a challenging place to learn in. The class would get started, and this lady, who I nicknamed Elvira, would come in late and stand directly in front of the teacher so that the rest of us couldn't see. It was infuriating. I talked to the teacher multiple times, and so did the other students. Basically, he didn't care. It got to the point that I was so stressed about Elvira that I was getting 0 relaxation benefit from the class, and I quit. I have no idea why the teacher chose to let her dictate how the class was run, and I suspect that most of my classmates quit soon after I did. Elvira was a great example of someone who only considered her needs and not the needs of the rest of the class. When the 5 of Swords appears in a reversed position, there isn't much difference from the upright card. It is still a difficult or unnecessary conflict, but the aftermath may be more difficult. Let's use the 5 of Swords card as an example. Let's say you were one of the retreating figures who had clearly lost the battle, which was already hard enough. But then you learned that the bully had tricked your best friend into revealing your location, which enabled him to take you by surprise. So not only did you lose, but you were also deceived by your best friend. Those are things that could make losing even worse. Other meanings of the Five of Swords reversed include that things are unfair or your bully has an unfair advantage, that you need to be on your guard, that it's time to end a conflict, perhaps by reaching some form of compromise, or that you've decided to continue fighting a losing battle. Here's an example of the reversed Five of Swords from my life and about an unfair advantage. I've used all of my personal stories on this subject, so here is one from the local news. I'll warn you that it is a tragic story, so feel free to use the timestamp and skip to the next chapter. But basically, we had an incident on Long Island, where I live, about an 8-year-old autistic boy who was extremely badly abused and died. The night he died, as a punishment, his dad made him sleep in the garage where the temperature was under 20 degrees and the boys died of hypothermia. It was widely known that the boy, whose name was Thomas Vulva, was badly abused. But here's the deal. The dad was an NYPD cop, so nobody wanted to touch him. Tragically, the dad had an unfair advantage in the legal system, although in the end, both he and his fiancée were sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. So that's an example of a bully, which I think is an understatement in this case since he was convicted of murder, having an unfair advantage. So here are some questions to help you connect with the Five of Swords. Have you ever been a bully in a situation? Have you owned up to your behavior? How do you deal with people who have unfair advantages? Do you fight back or retreat? Do you want to win at all costs? Or do you consider how your victory will affect the people you beat? Does it bother you to have an unfair advantage? If you have one, will you use it? And is there something new that you'd like to succeed at? So I hope that this video has given you a good look into the Five of Swords, and please join me for the next video, which is the Six of Swords.